Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster and I thought I would finish off our little eating spoon today. Now this is just about finished drying and as you can see not much change from the last time we saw it, but all the moisture's gone. And what I'm going to do today is just two very simple things. I'm going to give it a bit of a light sanding and then I'm going to give it a coating of oil. Now I'm not planning on this being a particularly long video, but I thought I'd just sort of mention a few things as I'm going along that I find useful when you're finishing a small spoon like this. So what I think I'll do, I'll move the camera a bit closer in and we'll make a start. Right then guys, so when I'm sanding a small item like a spoon, there are two things I like to use. One is a small sanding block like this. Now this is a fairly inexpensive one, but you can get much cheaper. You can just get a piece of cork. You can even use an offcut of wood, but I do quite like this one because it's made of rubber. It's got a little bit of flex in it. The other thing I like to use is just a random small piece of sandpaper. The block is very good for working out things like tool marks, gives you something you can put a bit of pressure on, and it just makes the process that little bit faster, that little bit easier. And then the loose sandpaper is great for getting into sort of curved areas, little pieces like this where the sanding block is not going to be able to reach very well, and really just for sort of getting rid of those last bits of detail. Now with the sanding block on something like this, which is obviously quite thin, say we're working on the back of the spoon here, temptation is for a lot of people, I think, is just to hold it by the handle and start doing this. That's fine, you can do that, but because this neck area, where are we, here, is quite thin, if you put too much pressure on this, there's a risk it might snap. So what I'll usually do is put a finger under the bowl, that way I'm supporting the neck and the back of the spoon, and you can really put quite a lot of pressure on there and start working away some of those tool marks. You can also obviously do it with just a piece of sandpaper. The problem I've found over the years is that if you're using just sandpaper and say your thumb or a finger, you get a lot of heat building up because of the friction, and I've got blisters on the thumb and on my fingers quite regularly through that, which is why I favour this kind of sanding block. So what I'll do, I'll just spend a minute or two just starting to sort of work this down a little bit. I won't bore you with the whole process and I won't bring you through all of the grits, just because kind of, this is all fairly obvious stuff. What I will say while I'm doing this is that the grits I tend to use is what is this? This is an 80 grit. This is the one I always start with. I don't really see the necessity of going any lower than 80 grit. I mean, you could use a 70, I suppose. There's not much difference in it. But if you go much lower than that, although the sandpaper is more abrasive and will work more quickly, it does produce its own tool marks. So I find an 80 is a fairly good one to start with, mostly because it doesn't leave a great deal of tool marks. When I'll give you a close-up here at the back of the spoon, I mean, you can see where the abrasive parts of the sandpaper have left little lines, but they're not very thick and they're not very deep, which means when I run over this with a 180 or a 240 or sometimes even a 320 if I want it really, really smooth, it takes away these kind of abrasion marks from the 80 grit really, really easily. If I was going to use something like a 40 or a 20 grit, these marks in here would be much, much deeper and therefore just that little bit more difficult to get rid of. So as I say, I'm just going to do this for probably a couple of minutes. And being brutally honest, this is all we're doing. We're just taking let me find a good, there we go. So just up here you can see these little tool marks or chatter marks from where I was last carving it with the knife. And to be honest, if I just give that, I don't know, a couple of dozen passes with the sandpaper, they're not completely removed. Where are we there? But you can kind of see how quickly they get removed with an 80 grit piece of sandpaper. So as I say, I'm just going to carry on doing this. I'll work through the grits and I'll come back when we're ready to oil. Right then guys, so here we have our sanded spoon. Couple of little imperfections in there, but nothing that's really going to make any problems for us. And all I'm going to do now is just drop it into my little pot of almond oil and leave it sitting in there for maybe an hour or two. Now because this pot's fairly small, I'm going to put the handle in first, just let that soak up a little bit of that oil, and then hopefully quite carefully spin it round and drop it in. And all I'm going to do is cover that back over just to stop me from spilling it more than anything, and that will sit there now for a couple of hours. Right then guys, so I took these out of the oil about 10 minutes ago just to let them sort of drip dry on their own. There's still a fair bit of excess on there, and all I'm going to do is just wipe that off with a clean bit of kitchen towel. You can use anything for this, you can use cloth or tissue or what have you. Really all you're looking to do is just to get the majority of that excess oil off. And I'm doing 2 spoons here because I already had one in soaking. And really that's about it. What I will do in between now and the kind of my last little clip of this video, I will make sure that these have sat for probably about half an hour, and once they've done that, any excess oil that's going to leach out from inside the wood that's soaked in should have gone, and we should be left with our finished spoons. Right then guys, so here we have our finished spoon, and hopefully you'll agree, albeit it's a little bit simple, a bit basic, no ornamentation, but I'm quite pleased with that. The oil finish has really brought out the grain in the wood, and this is the stage where normally I would decide if I'm going to leave it like this or go any further, maybe give it a beeswax finish or something. This one I'm going to leave as it is. It's going to be a gift for someone, and I think this is probably just about right. And that's it. So I mean, this little mini series was really just to show you the method I use to make my spoons. I might change the shape and the design, etc. every now and again, but generally what I've shown you over the last few episodes is how I make my spoons, and that seems to work for me. There are other ways of doing it, there are other tools you can use, there's different variations of sort of a similar theme, but that's kind of how I do it. So really guys, that was it. So I hope this little mini series has been useful. As usual, comments and questions in the box below. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks guys.